looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Hollywood, we need to talk. More to the point, you need to get on the couch and start reflecting on what's going right, what's going wrong, and how the audience is getting frustrated and at times alienated. This little therapy session is for the execs and bigwigs who are looking at some huge flops this year, a changing model of consumption, and an audience who is now heard in more ways than ever when it comes to both poor and good products. Basically, in today's video, we're going to take a look at Hollywood through the prism of a reflective psychological counselling model and try to work out a way forward for the Tinseltown behemoth amidst a rapidly changing world. This video will follow our counselling model and, by the end of it, we will hopefully have something for Hollywood to work towards in 2024 and beyond. Now, in any counselling session, only about 25% of the work happens inside the session, and the other 75% occurs once the client goes away, reflects, and puts the new information, techniques, and learning into action in the real world. And the reason I cite all this is because in 2023, Hollywood is going through a tough time. So, to manage the changes in streaming, release dates, budgets, and consumer attitudes, we need to look at the problem and work through the cycle and see how Hollywood can move forward. Now, I'm not referring to the ongoing actors, writers, and potentially, by the end of this video, possible VFX strike, as Hollywood has seen those before, and for an industry which is always chasing the dollar sign, proportionality, greed, sharing, profit and sustainability are always going to be issues amongst employers and employees amidst a changing economic world of consumerism and technology. Also, by the time this video comes out, the strikes may well have been resolved, and at the end of the day, one day they will be resolved, as without writers and actors and VFX, Hollywood has no product. So let's work through Hollywood's problems with stage 1 of Kolb's model of reflection for our counselling cycle, concrete experience. And as for this model, it goes in 4 stages. We have experience, reflection, conceptualization, and experimentation. Basically, we start with a problem, work through the issues, and then at the end, we have a plan to put into action, which could hopefully improve things. So, as I said, we're starting with concrete experience and fact. Okay, back in 2020, when we were all playing a real-life game of Plague Inc., the world of streaming truly exploded as, with the entire world shut down, we turned on our TVs as a method of passing the time. Now, streaming wasn't a new phenomenon back then. Netflix had already opened the door and positively built a great business model around it, and, with Disney Plus on their horizon, their attempt at the street-level MCU was ended as they didn't want to help the competition. Anyway, back to 2020, and with the world getting pressure sores on couches and futons, the streaming services went from budding business models to full-on lifestyle, and so Paramount, Warner Brothers, Prime, Netflix, Apple, and so many more all fought for a share of a now booming market. However, upon having all these big releases and the world of media being pumped down our broadband, expectations, entitlements, and the way we consumed media changed, as did the world, and, much like working at home and virtual appointments, we evolved to a new style of consumption and comfort. The problem with streaming is that, unlike physical media, we no longer own anything, and with all the studios then clamouring for their USPs and biggest hits to be the main viewing points on their own subscription sites, you need to keep a steady supply of hits and intellectual properties to ensure that people don't look at your site as a luxury which can go once you hit the downloadable content pack of real-life Plague Inc., which is the cost of living crisis in a post-COVID world. Quite simply, everyone rushed to establish themselves in the market, but now at saturation point and with people cutting back, consistency and quality are the only reason many people are hanging on to some of their subscriptions. It's a competitive market, and not only do we have subscription streaming, but we also have on-demand purchases, which are coming out with narrowed release windows on Amazon or on your internet provider, and whilst these cost roughly the same as a physical Blu-ray, it's still a cheaper alternative to wait for these to come out at home than it is to go to the cinema and pay for a bunch of tickets for the whole family. So, Let's say you love one film, but there are other competing movies and you are counting the pennies in the post-real-life plaguing world of this cost of living crisis. Deciding to wait 3 or 4 weeks while a movie completes its cinema run and rent it at home for $15.99 with a takeaway is, like I said before, a darn sight cheaper than buying 4 cinema tickets, petrol, or gas to my American viewers, sweets, hot dogs and drinks, and having a night out at the pictures. So what we have is a greater selection of films amongst a tighter set of finances for the consumer, but more ways to consume based upon our own eagerness. Way back at the turn of the century, when The Phantom Menace came out, the film stayed in cinemas for many months and, in terms of viewing it at home, I saw the movie in September when I came home from university, but I couldn't buy it on VHS, showing my age there, until the following April. However, windows from cinema releases to home releases now are tighter than me when it's my turn to buy the takeaway pizza, and in 2023, Hollywood is staring at multiple box office flops which have failed to draw people to the cinema. However, there are lots of other factors to consider here, and this is where we come to part 2, the reflective part of our model. Let me digress for a moment. In England, which lies in the now very fractious 4 nations of the not-so-united kingdom, we have a football league called the Premier League. It's the biggest football league in Europe, my team is Aston Villa, and every year you can guarantee that the season will contain the usual teams who will do well, a big team that has a bit of a nightmare, a small team that overachieves, a big team which gets pulled into a surprise relegation fight, and so forth. And the box office results for films' summer silly season often follow the same pattern. For many years now, Disney has ruled over the box office with the Marvel Cinematic Universe phases 1 to 3 and the Star Wars trilogy, which, whilst not well received and certainly not something I ever want to watch again, the films did turn a profit and crushed the opposition. Well, at least until Solo. In between all that, we have continued to have some surprise blockbusters as well, and, now including Disney, films that were expected to top the box office league are struggling to now make the top 10. Now, there are many reasons for this. Firstly, as I said, in the post-real-life Plague Inc. game, we are experiencing an inflation problem and a cost of living crisis. People are choosing what to see, and certainly here in the UK, where food has become so expensive, a cap on food inflation was recently discussed in Parliament. People are choosing their leisure time more carefully based on how much it costs. So the boom days of a new blockbuster every week isn't really a sensible model at the moment, and films need time to breathe. The release dates of movies are currently more packed than a week's worth of storylines in the Australian soap Home and Away. For example, just this week while writing this video on Summer Bay, there's been a child saved from a cult, a main character has been sexually assaulted, and a bomb has gone off, all inside 7 days. And perhaps Hollywood needs to reflect now, not just on the old quantity versus quality proverb, but the spacing of said quality and quantity. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 has underperformed despite good reviews and being a generally good movie. And it's come from a franchise which, since Ghost Protocol at the very least, has gone from strength to strength. Maybe it's Mission Impossible fatigue, but for that film, it was followed a week later by a Leviathan called Barbenheimer. Now, of course, Barbenheimer isn't a movie. Barbenheimer is the colloquial term for the phenomenon of the Barbie movie and Chris Nolan's Oppenheimer being released together and absolutely obliterating the box office. Now, whilst the Barbie movie may look like a surprise hit, I'm not so sure. Let's be honest, superhero films are well into a parody stage at the minute, and we all have a bit of fatigue. Doctor Strange 2 was awful, Love and Thunder was an absolute comedic travesty, The Eternals was an MCU plot-ridden whole borathon, and the fails of Black Adam, Shazam 2 and The Flash have shown that the superhero bubble has definitely burst, or at least we are all a little jaded with the genre. Yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home did okay, but that tripped on nostalgia. But overall, the critics and receipts are showing that people want something new. Barbie, on the other hand, is a toy brand of God knows how many years, is played with by little girls around the world, is the perfect family-friendly film to take young kids to when picking only one trip to the cinema for the whole family in a cost of living crisis. It's also a safe bet for the girlfriends when they're asked to pick movie night. And despite some mouthpieces in the media banging on about its messaging, the film has two very attractive lead stars, is inoffensive, and there are no heroes just punching each other. And whilst Marvel beats its drum about strong female characters and superhero for girls, it seems that what many people want is just something different. And for many young girls, a franchise which isn't about robots, men punching bad guys, and general comic books seems to be a refreshing alternative. Barbie is a built-in brand, and whilst I haven't seen anything from the film apart from the rather catchy "I'm Just Ken" song, the acid test will be for Barbie 2, when the audience will either return or they won't. Now, whilst Barbie is the antidote to repetitive superhero films and the franchises of endless sequels, Oppenheimer is the perfect opposite to Barbie. Sure, it's got Chris Nolan and his films are usually well received, but considering Tenet was a bit of a mess for critics and audiences, Oppenheimer has stormed to a box office win despite being a 3-hour biopic about a man who made a nuclear bomb. Oppenheimer is the perfect choice of summer movie if you don't want a load of screaming kids in the theatre, you think Barbie is the cinematic equivalent of a brain hemorrhage, and you want your money's worth from a good night out. Yes, the two films have an Oasis versus Blur Britpop moment in time where some pick a side, but overall, after years of similar product and declining product, and I'm again referring to the superhero genre, Hollywood has another therapy question. When is too much too much? And when does a surprise hit signify a real change in direction in the market? In other words, do we need a new blockbuster every single week at the cinema? Do we need 5 comic book movies a year? And in between those movies, do we really need rehashes, remakes, and reboots of previous nostalgia like live-action remakes of animated films, Transformers, or even, God forbid, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Dementia? Talking of that film, Hollywood, your entire production model needs a damn good overhaul as, not only with the cost of living crisis and certainly the effect of streaming, is any film apart from the odd fluke or nailed-on winners like Avatar or a mass Avengers event going to make a profit on a budget of $300 million. And for context, once you add on the advertising budget and cinema cut of the profits, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Dementia needed to make at least $600 million just to break even. And at what point, after the critically mauled Crystal Skull, divisive Star Wars films, and ongoing war with independent media, such as YouTubers, and unnecessary political virtue signalling, did anyone at Disney think the world would be clamouring for an 80-year-old Indiana Jones being schooled by Phoebe Waller-Bridge? Well, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Dementia is set to lose Disney over $300 million, and, looking at the runaway success of Barbenheimer, the break-even but slightly disappointing results for Dead Reckoning Part 1, and even the critically slaughtered but modestly budgeted The Meg 2, Disney's arrogance has been their undoing. George Lucas put a really good in-depth documentary on the Revenge of the Sith DVD many years ago about just how 1 minute of film took hundreds of people, from the writer, the actors, the training, the VFX, the lighting, the sound, right down to the catering department, and he showed just how Hollywood sprayed money around just to make 60 seconds of a movie. And backing up that example, in the UK, Charlie Brooker, a comedian, he's mostly known for writing the series Black Mirror, once broke down the compromises and costs of his zombie TV show Dead Set, which chronologises a zombie outbreak amidst a live episode of the TV show Big Brother, and how the housemates inside assume the only ones left alive in the UK. Brooker talked about everything, every single scene, even right down to the contact lenses they had to buy costing too much, how the actors were only available for this, how you had to move entire catering budgets, how you had to cordon off parts of an area. He talked about the expense and said at the end of the day, what might look like a fairly inexpensive and inoffensive shot can cost an absolute fortune. Now, I have no doubt there are many companies and industries which rinse Hollywood of every single penny when they bring a new film to town or lease a catering contract out. But come on, Hollywood, the budgets are too big because, unlike the old days, we are splitting our cinema money not just between food in this inflation-mad world, but we are already giving you money via streaming and demanding a product is already there. Basically, as films come around to home release quicker and we have streaming, cinema comes home, on demand, and even renting off your TV internet provider, we're giving less to the cinemas. So Hollywood, you need to find a way of making films for less, because at $200 to $300 million a movie, you ain't making that back in most cases. And I haven't even spoken about piracy, as what with chipped fire sticks, illegal streaming, bootlegging, and many other ways you can watch films without paying, Hollywood needs to find a way to keep giving us great looking films but reduce the cost somehow when it comes to its fight against those who steal its product, and giving something to those who are already paying a monthly subscription to see their product. Now, I'm a big fan of physical media. I'm a big steelbook collector and I love the feel of Blu-rays, and there's nothing quite like a collector's edition, often with some extra gifts like cards or a poster or a t-shirt. But with collector's editions of films now coming out every few years, and the cost of physical media now going beyond the old $12.99 to $15.99 up to $24.99 and even higher, special editions are losing their spice a little, as no quicker do we get the home release, we get the uncut release, then a collector's edition release, then an anniversary release, and so forth. So sometimes for fairly meh films, having that film via renting a streaming service can work out cheaper if you're watching enough a month to cancel out the cost of buying it, or your streaming service like Disney Plus is keeping the kids happy, as with all the Pixar's, Star Wars and Marvel stuff they love to watch, it can keep them occupied in the holidays. Yet, Disney streaming is also an act of self-harm on their box office, as if you're paying your subscription fees, you know it's coming to D+, and you know that if you wait long enough, as there is plenty of other things out there to watch in the interim, you will pay less than a movie ticket price to see the film eventually. It may not be the cinema comes home or on-demand turnaround of Fast X or The Flash, but if an aging Indiana Jones doesn't inspire you upon the trailer, you're gonna write it into your "I'll wait for D+ list" from that moment on. Chasing the magical dollar and focusing on trends has hurt the Hollywood wallet recently. D+, Max and Netflix are all losing subscribers and changing their subscription models, and this is the problem with pumping out content which tries to cater for everything and everyone but fails to offer enough for anyone to keep all of their subscriptions open. Disney Plus is perhaps the most guilty of this in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars. Once promising a line of shows on Star Wars and Marvel which weren't going to be essential viewing to see the main films, and also packed with high budget quality, things like Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk and Secret Invasion have all offered very little and have been a far cry from the unmissable binges of the early Netflix street-level individual series of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage and, less so, Iron Fist. They are also a world away from the charm and magic of Stranger Things, and certainly fail to capture the must-watch episodes and OMG moments of, say, a drama like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones. Star Wars has been even more egregious in terms of quality, with Kenobi frustrating fans, The Mandalorian falling off a cliff, and the Book of Boba Fett bemusing and amusing in equal measure. And for Netflix, who found some foreign gems like Squid Game and All of Us Are Dead, as well as the phenomenon of Stranger Things, their recent effort at making a Resident Evil franchise was an absolute catastrophic fail. For Warner Brothers, or HBO, or Max, as its streaming service is called, things have been somewhat different in terms of dramas. Chernobyl was a very dark but undeniably brilliant show, and The Last of Us proved you can make a video game adaptation with truly heartfelt moments and high production values, and it gave us some truly memorable scenes and water cooler talk moments that we are still talking about. However, like psychological defense mechanisms, Hollywood doesn't reflect, it reacts. And with the huge numbers watching Barbie on the big screen and the huge numbers watching The Last of Us on the small screen, you can almost hear the execs screaming at the interns to go and find them the next video game adaptation or girls' toy so it can make even more money out of a fad and a craze, rather than look at what made Barbie so popular and The Last of Us such a big hit at home. Cinema is the most magical thing in the world, and I love nothing more than movie night, but with the cost of cinema tickets, the sometimes uncomfortable experience of sitting by noisy strangers, and the advent of 75-inch television screens with surround sound and 4K pictures, home is now a really competitive market when it comes to watching movies. And, in terms of Barbie, like I said earlier, it's not so much that Barbie is necessarily going to be the pinnacle of movies to follow now, it's more a refreshing alternative for an audience that feels it's had nothing new for far too long. Sure, nothing's ever going to compare to an IMAX screen, and from the memories of seeing Watership Down, Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom as a kid, right through to watching Independence Day, the Star Wars prequels, and even some of the big Marvel movies like Civil War and Infinity War on the big screen, cinema is still one of the best nights out you can have. It just now needs a special reason to pull you there. However, like the internet killed the high street shopping experience, on-demand and streaming is really hurting cinemas, and in the post-real-life Plague Inc. world, Hollywood needs to reflect on release windows, cinema budgets, and look at what people are watching and following that and reflecting on it, rather than just spurting out more product, more of this, like J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man, which might get a raising rapturous roar in Hall H of Comic-Con as everyone ejaculates spontaneously over the brand new news. But it doesn't thrill people who are going to invest in their downtime at home in something which engages and hooks them to the screen. Nor is it going to get those post-real-life Plague Inc. adapted and firmed buttocks from endlessly sitting on the couch up and to the cinema if you've already been bored by it before. If you've watched Thor Love and Thunder and been scarred by paying for something so bad, the next superhero film, DC, Marvel, whatever, don't matter, you're going to take a long, hard look at it. And so we come to the third stage after reflection, which is abstract conceptualization, which is all about learning from experience. Now, before we get into this, Hollywood, where have the love stories gone? Now, I understand times have changed and women and men are creatures of empowerment and equal rights and we don't need a lover to save us or complete us, but dear God, the staple of falling in love and saving said loved one is nothing about losing empowerment. It's magical, it's wonderful, and it's been bringing people to tears in the cinema and punching the air in joy for years. And it's nothing to do with women saying, well, we shouldn't need a man to save us, or a man saying, I don't want to take away anyone's independence. And instead, let's move away from the Twitter minorities and the de-individuation of coalescing like-minded people and remember what makes great movies great. Storytelling, characterization, conflict, and magic. And I don't mean Harry Potter or Paul Daniels magic. I mean the notion of finding someone and growing to love them and seeing them save the day, or seeing the hero stand up and find that motive to fight back because someone he loves, like Neo and Trinity in The Matrix, is there to be saved. There's no shame in being saved by someone, whatever the gender, and men have been saving women, and women have been saving men for decades of film. Take Aliens from 1986. Ripley saves the majoritively male crew. She then keeps everyone alive with her great planning, but then, when locked in a room with facehuggers, she needs saving by some men. It doesn't matter about the gender. Let it go. Let's just have great characters in peril and they get rescued. When we're writing it, think, wouldn't it be amazing? This is going to get people on the edge of their seat rather than saying, stop, stop, stop. I can't have a man doing that. Or, no. It's not fair if the woman doesn't say that. Ignore that. Just come back to movie magic. Cinema characters don't need identity politics, and cinema characters shouldn't arrive as the finished article only to get more awesome the more they discover themselves. Characters need to fail, fall in love, lean on someone, make mistakes, develop, and we need to remove the anxiety about we're disrespecting her empowerment and just let people fall in love. Sexual undertones and odd couples bonding, and that could be any gender, are the cornerstone of cinema chemistry. It's what we watch movies for. And that leads me back to Disney Plus's Star Wars and Marvel shows not really offering unmissable and gripping television. Think back to great dramas and the character changes, the journeys, the overcoming of trauma, the conflicts, and the way the story engaged you week to week. So when it came on, you were there, sat down, cup of tea in hand, or pint of Guinness or whatever you drink, going, not missing this week's episode, last week's just, love it. Now I know streaming releases things in binges, but Disney Plus are still releasing week to week, as are Amazon with many of their shows. So it's still about watching one week and coming back the following week because you're hooked. And even in the downtime where episodes underwent minimal events or were very restrained in terms of budget, or you felt not a lot happened, you still loved the characters and followed the shows religiously because you knew in any minute things could change, and more to the point, it was adding to a longer arc of dynamics, and when the episode ended, you just wanted another one. The other problem is what feels like the constant agendas and virtue signalling which needs to be kept as far away from film and TV as it can. From Rey's Mary Sue type character, the Force is female mantra, to characters like Hawkeye being second fiddle in their own show to Kate Bishop. I know it's about setting up Kate Bishop for a spin-off or a Young Avengers, but it's frustrating in the same way Obi-Wan appeared to be sidelined to Reva in his own show. And you can throw as much money as you want and as much diversity as you want at things, but it won't make a difference and it won't make something entertaining if it isn't engaging. Take Doctor Who Series 4 of The New Who with David Tennant and an episode 11, called Midnight. It pretty much took place in one confined set and was about what people are reduced to when under pressure and in danger. The monster was never seen, and when it does get in and possesses someone, the whole point of the episode was it was made on the cheap, so the budget wasn't there and they had to make do with what they had, which was great characters, tension, and the Doctor fighting for his life as everyone turned on him. It was a terrifically tense storyline. Everything developed, there was peril, danger, threat, menace, the Doctor was overpowered and very nearly died, closer than he's come to dying than when he's faced Daleks, for example. And even the overall arc was furthered as we dropped more hints about missing planets to the oncoming Dalek-ageddon of the last 2 episodes. It was terrific TV which cost about 1 iota of Book of Boba Fett, but it has more drama and character than the whole series of old Boba telling everyone he was going to rule with respect. That episode of Doctor Who was dark, but it wasn't gory, and, unlike Boba Fett, it added menace, threat, and a real sense of jeopardy to its third act that kept you hooked. In terms of identity politics and writers proving how awesome they are, nobody cares, Hollywood. Taika Waititi promoted Thor Love and Thunder as the gayest film ever, and then, when it came out to a universal thumbs down, he claimed, well, aren't we all a bit queer, amid criticism that he over-exaggerated how much LGBTQ plus content would be in it. Truth be told about Taika, though, is if he just stopped giving himself the old reach around and focused instead on a good story amidst a compacted and spiralling Phase 4, the film might have done better. And maybe making homosexuality something completely normal and acceptable, rather than something you're shouting eureka about, then the audience wouldn't be so divided between aggressive Twitter activism and people just rolling their eyes at more of the identity politics and poor quality films that the MCU keeps churning out whilst jumping up and down about the things that they're doing for equality, akin to as if they're a child learning to have used the toilet for the first time. Even Marvel's Kevin Feige got in on the stupidity of bringing agendas to the half-decent WandaVision, stating that the reason Doctor Strange wasn't in WandaVision, as he was the king sorcerer and the man who should have been there, was because he couldn't have a white guy showing up and telling a woman how to use her power. And you know what, Kevin Feige? No one cares. We'd love to have seen Doctor Strange come and help out. It would have made the show infinitely better as it started to trail off and then fall off a cliff towards the end. Look, the world changes. That's why we're not making films like the 70s and the 80s anymore, and in years to come, we won't make films like we've done in the 2020s, as the world will change again. But what never changes in cinema are the core ethics of storytelling, conflict, and the journey through adversity and genuine threat, loss, emotion, etc., etc. With Stage 4 of Marvel now so disorganised and all over the place that it's not worth keeping tabs on, to Star Wars currently having no films in production, which is unthinkable considering The Force Awakens made over $2 billion in 2015, Disney are now releasing TV shows and films which are underperforming, yet they seem to refuse to change their ways. Now, I know that unlike when you sack a football manager and the results can improve the next week, it's not that simple with a movie company, and it's more like turning a cruise liner in a narrow stretch of water. And the reasons for this is because most of the films and projects are greenlit and budgeted for, and then filmed and then put for VFX, and this takes years and years. So the films coming out now have been planned for the past 3-4 years. So, to improve the future now, Disney needs to look at what's gone wrong and rectify it now. We won't see the results straight away, but in a few years, things could start to change. Now look, I still don't really know what woke means. It seems to be a word which sends some people into a blind rage, and I'm aware it comes from the African American vernacular English, meaning alert to racial prejudice and discrimination, but be it this wokeness thing or if it's just poor writing, the strategy of taking on politics in the outside world, Disney's war with their own governor of Florida, a good example, The drama and conflict need to come first, not all of that. And we also don't need Hollywood directors turning around admitting before the films come out they're going to ruin your childhood or take it in a new direction. It's going to upset lots of people. I'm looking at you, Rian Johnson and Taika Waititi. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to court controversy. You just need a show people really want to watch. It's that simple. Netflix's attempt at Resident Evil was like having an open goal in the last minute of a football match in front of 75,000 fans at the World Cup final, and then somehow shooting the ball wide. It's a franchise loved by millions, with lore and canon of multiple games, and to make a show which stripped everything from the games and took all the fun out of it was just a baffling choice. And then, as often is the case when things fail, Hollywood, stop blaming the fans for your poor product. Look, I get it, there are toxic fans in every franchise and these people are across the world, but they are a minority, and this minority of people are always going to complain and are never going to be happy. But criticism isn't toxic. In other words, just because you critique something and say it's not very good, it doesn't make you toxic. It's a valid point that you need to listen. You can't have everything your own way. You can't just have praise when it goes well and disregard criticism when something isn't good. Independent media, such as YouTubers, may not be your cup of tea, or they may have strong views, but that doesn't make them all toxic or uneducated. These are the guys who watched, read, bought and lived these franchises from comics to video games to TV to film, and if you check their reviews, praise is always given where praise is due. However, as I said before, Hollywood, you can't take all the praise when you do something right and then dismiss the criticism as toxic the minute something goes wrong, the box office drops off a cliff, or people start turning around and saying it's not very good. Rather than turn around and say, oh, it's all toxic fandom, it's all trolls, the films aren't made for these people. Turn around and listen to them. Look at what they're saying. Listen to their criticism and learn from it. I'm not saying you have to change and adapt everything, but everything is a feedback loop, and you can't live in the echo chamber where I only get praise, I only want praise, everything else is toxic. Not interested, that's toxic. It's not. It's criticism. I write books, I get criticism. You have to take the good with the bad. The good is great, it makes you feel great. But when someone says something's not very good or they'd like to have seen more than that, you take it on board, and that's part of your feedback and development loop. In other words, reflect and put into practice. Look at trends and cultures and audiences' reactions and learn to live with independent reviewers like YouTubers, because they are not your enemy. They will promote and praise, but they, by nature and fairness, will also destroy. And they will do it when they see something that isn't very good and deserves pulling up. And okay, Disney Star Wars has lots of its own fans, and rightly so, and that's their gift to have, and by all means listen to them. But more importantly, look at what works in your own products and in the products of others. Why did The Last of Us create a frenzy of excitement when Resident Evil was laughed at? Why has Star Wars box office died over the past 8 years? Why is streaming now shedding subscribers? Why is Secret Invasion not being watched by many people? Why did Stranger Things do so well? Why do I have a big smile on my face when Susie Pooh and Dusty Bun sing Never Ending Story, yet I roll my eyes when Darth Vader fights Obi-Wan in Near Pitch Black? Fans are not to blame for poor product. Yes, fans can get things wrong, and fans can sometimes not turn up to great films. Fight Club, John Carpenter's The Thing, Cloverfield, Watchmen are all examples of that, but they're also examples that once they hit home release, they became cult classics and have since been revered as great films. We live in a world now where the big releases cost lots of money and are often linked to extended universes, have spin-offs or sequels in mind, and are being about flagship products for streaming. However, some of the best surprise products, like Squid Game, like Stranger Things, are punts, and they're punts from good writers with good production values. It's possible to have both. Fans have opinions and they will always be divided, but in a world of aggregate scores like Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, and a place where anyone can post a review, your feedback is going to be more vociferous and noisy than it was 20 years ago when you had to be a blogger or a fanzine writer to get any kind of noise outside established critics. In upshot, listen to fans. Read alternative scripts. Look at why someone like HBO or Netflix might have an absolute killer series there, rather than launch Indiana Jones 6 or make a 10-episode run of the astonishing Squirrel Girl where we focus on her sexuality, rather than the conflict of coming to terms with her abilities and the moral stance the hero faces. Into and Across the Spider-Verse tackled the hero's journey really well recently, and both those films have been a critical and commercial success. And part of the reason for that is competent writers with lack of studio interference and given creative control. Yes, of course the films have their faults, but overall they are universally popular and loved. So come on Hollywood, let's get back to the idea of taking a character, setting them on a journey and building a story with jeopardy where they develop. This shouldn't be lost on you. Hollywood, get out of this victim mentality when it comes to being criticised, and also stop writing characters who are fully formed and awesome when we meet them. Put story ahead of offending people or worrying about how your issues are coming across in this post-Weinstein world. And if people come after you, then sort the wheat from the chaff. If it's 50,000 loud complaints but a 9 out of 10 on Metacritic, take the win. Writers, you need to accept feedback and remember that the main reason we pay for streaming and films is we want good product and we want to be entertained. Squid Game happily made comments on poverty and desperation and how syndicates of symbiosis form amongst like-minded bullies and friends when under pressure, and it had some fabulous queer moments too when the billionaires turned up to watch the game, but that was part of the story and not an agenda. And as for the recent disaster that was Doctor Who under Chris Chibnall, Chris, can I tell you something? Your companions can have an arc and a story too. Ryan and Yaz could have fallen in love and even had sex. Graham could have killed Tim Shaw in retaliation for Grace dying, and there could have been conflict over the Doctor's involvement in Grace dying, because had the Doctor not fallen out the sky, Grace would still be alive. But no, the fam, Jesus Christ, just went week to week and didn't develop one jot, and the Doctor went on boring adventure after boring adventure. Christ, go back to the David Tennant era again. Look at the fires of Pompeii when the Doctor and Donna debate saving people that he refuses to when he says that this is a fixed event in time and I can't interfere. And then when it turns out the Doctor is the one who has to kill everyone in Pompeii to make this event happen, look at how he and Donna bond, go through trauma and develop, and the heart-rending scenes that happen. Why are modern film and TV so afraid to offend, test, put characters in places where they either grow or implode, or tackle difficult topics and be bold and brave? Anyway, it's time for the final part of our counselling loop and trying out what we have learned. It's time to go and put that therapy into action in the real world. So, Hollywood, what have we learned? Well, we know you need to refine your budgets as the days of profligacy are gone. And there are some green shoots of hope here now, as Paramount Studios, who made the enjoyable but ultimately money-losing Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, have already stated that any future sequel will need to have a budget at least half of the $200 million of the first film. Also, Hollywood, you know that demand is down because we have more choice, and you know that people are being more choosy and now have multiple ways of watching movies and how they are willing to pay for them. Your streaming services were making a killing during the real-life Plague Inc. years where we're all stuck in the house. But now at saturation point and with too many and the world open again, we're choosing very carefully what we pay monthly subscriptions for based on personal choice and worthwhile viewing points. And we know there are some great dramas out there, and there's also some great phenomenons which have gripped the world, and we know Hollywood can produce quality. We also know that YouTube and independent media and aggregate scores are changing criticism, and we know that being a successful YouTuber is now a very solid business model. So for some, yes, being overly critical is going to be their thing. But like I said before, majority of YouTubers who have any brains and are extremely well received offer praise in equal measure. The joy of independent media like YouTubers is they are passionate about the movies and franchises they watch. So simply use them, look at them, learn from that passion. You're going to win in the long haul. We know politics is divisive and agenda-filled and cinema is escapism, and the two don't mix. And wanting a film where there's discussions about sexuality and identity politics as the main selling point isn't going to necessarily make people watching it less sensitive or phobic. It just means that they actually may not even go in the first place. You can put these things in the story and they should flow as part of the character, not as great big neon flags sticking up at showing how clever you are. And we've got no problems with strong female characters. We've got no problems with diversity as long as the story comes first and the characters around it. Times are changing, Hollywood. Restrain your budgets and run times. And again, the run times is something else that I want to push on. My God, films are getting long. A good film is about pacing as well. You can be equally thrilled and kept on the edge of your seat for a 90-minute or a 2-hour film, but a 2-hour 45-minute film or a 3-hour 15-minute film, that can just lead you into boredom. Most of all, though, Hollywood unleash the imagination and put your protagonists through hell. Learn that death is devastating and characters evolve. Love is thrilling and defining, and we all need someone sometimes rather than worry about it impacting their empowerment. In the coming years, we may see streaming giants combine, swallow one another, or fold completely and revert to what they used to do, like when Warner Brothers basically leased Friends to Netflix for $100 million in 1 year. But until then, we've got to manage with what we've got, and more people will hemorrhage from subscribing if the quality isn't any good. Streaming is here to stay, and cinemas need to find a way to coexist with sofa movie nights. Maybe waiting longer between tentpole releases is a good way forward. It allows the economics and focus to trickle down more to independent films, and it also means people have more event reasons to go out. Isn't it better to have one film that makes $800 million than 3 films that lose a combined $200 million? And most of all, remember that audience feedback doesn't make the audience toxic. The declining box office may well be because, post-Real Life Plague Inc., we found a new way of living which suits us rather than the cinema times. But real hits, phenomenons, good quality films, date nights, hanging out with your mates, it still gets people to the cinema. And lower budget films also make money. Sound of Freedom, I'm looking at you. Word of mouth and great films get bums on seats and people talking. And when Stranger Things finally does come around again, and we clearly see the break in filming for the strikes when the kids go from looking about 18 to looking in their mid-30s, it will be an event which is going to get record views regardless because it's earned it. It's a show that has earned its audience and earned its stripes. So, Hollywood, it's been good to talk to you in this therapy session, and now you need to go and put things into practice. You need to go out there, learn from what's happened, stop relying on what's not working and blaming fans, and realise that sometimes a brand isn't enough. Star Wars, Resident Evil, Batman, Indiana Jones are all legendary and deserve care and loving effects and storytelling, but just slapping their brand on anything and using it as a method of activism isn't really acceptable. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. Remember that psychology is cool. So until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and even leave a comment if you want or a suggestion for a future video. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later. 'Cause I'm just kidding.